One of the other fascinating things that happened over the Scorpio full moon is this like really huge plantation burned down.
Yeah, that's why the name of the episode is Burn It Down. The ancestors are like, we just gotta take it. So this plantation burned. And I was thinking a lot about Neptune and Aries. So Neptune, the stories that we tell ourselves. Listen, I mean, the education in a lot of places in this country is like a white man's like fantasy.
Hello and welcome. This is Down to Astro. I'm Chani Nicholas.
I'm Thea Anderson.
And I'm Eliza Robertson.
And this is a podcast where we look at the astrology that just happened and how it aligns with world events. So the date today is May 20th, and we're going to look specifically at what happened over the course of like 2, 3, 4 of the biggest astrological moments. One of which was that full moon in Scorpio, which actually is connected to a lot of the different pieces of the astrology that we want to talk about. There's a trigger warning for a lot of this episode. We're talking about a Scorpio full moon. So there's a lot of like gruesome things that did come to light that we're going to talk about, and just to take care of yourself throughout the conversation. So the full moon happened on May 12th.
It stands out. The full moon in Scorpio is it's deep. It's like, we'll take you to the edge. It's edgy. It's the moon and the sign of war. It's in Mars' sign.
Oof.
And when it's there, as we all know, it's in its fall. So it's like emo.
We don't all know. What does that mean? What's the moon and what does it mean when it's in its fall?
The moon is our emotions. It's how we feel. It's like the fastest moving planetary body. And every month it has a lunation where it reaches its fullness, its peak visibility. And so when the moon opposes the sun, the sign that it is in says a ton. And it says a ton too, what aspects it's making to other planets. So this full moon in Scorpio, really brought up, like, it was emo, but like dangerous, but edgy, but like made you want to vom. Like,
I would say that's true for anything in Scorpio. It's like emo and dangerous.
Thea just said maybe want to vom. So
maybe want to what?
Maybe
vom.
Vom.
Bomb.
It's a little nausea.
Vom.
I just want to stand up for the Scorpio placements that don't want to vom.
Yeah. I always think of like a full moon in Scorpio as that kind of like edgy, emo, and dangerous. It's kind of like dangerously in emo, because the moon is about security and about our body and like stability, or it likes to be in signs like Taurus and Cancer that are about security and stability. And Scorpio is like, as you said, Thea, like a sign that's ruled by the planet of war. And so it just feels like all the places that we need to be secure and stable, kind of the rug gets pulled out from under us during that time. And I also think about Scorpio being related to horror. Eliza, do you concur having the Scorpio placements in this crowd?
Am I the only one?
I mean, I have something in Scorpio, but it's not it's not like what you have in Scorpio, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think Scorpio is stealth. Like Scorpio, there is a lot. You might have that depth that Thea you're talking about, but you're not going to see it. It doesn't wear its emotions on the sleeve. It's happening way down in the dungeon, in the sewage. I have a sewage story.
Oh, God. So do I.
Oh, no. We both have sewage stories.
Adjacent to.
Okay.
It's going to get
mine's pretty literal.
I can tell.
But
yeah, Scorpio's related to like waste, to poop.
Yeah.
To like gross things, creepy crawly things.
I just think like anything that's beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Too.
What's your story?
Okay, well, look, this is a little cheating because it was just the announcement was made during the Scorpio full moon. It's happening as we speak.
What?
Okay, what? Eliza.
The Scorpio.
Okay.
Scorpio is my fourth house. So the fourth house is home, family too, but importantly, home.
Yeah.
So now, right where I live. Yeah. So literally right now, they are doing something to the sewage system. They were supposed to do it last week. It was postponed.
Okay.
I am not allowed to flush the toilet. I am not allowed to have a shower. I am not, yes. I'm not allowed to do anything with the drains except I was told they're putting some kind of something into the system down there. And it can actually, they said that to stop it from getting into the house, I have to actually like plug all the drains and then fill it with this much water.
Because the vapor.
Yes.
Oh.
So this is happening right now.
That's so gross.
But it was supposed to happen last week. Anyway.
Okay. So on the Scorpio full moon, I'm like, I go through the day and I'm like, I feel a little like my body usually feels like a little effed up during the full moons. Like I am a chronic like migraine person. So sometimes I feel like it tweaks, like sets off a kind of migraine thing. And it didn't. So I was like, oh, I'm doing good. And it wasn't that tumultuous. I was like, okay, this isn't bad, which you should never say to yourself. And so I'm in the bathroom and my daughter's upstairs sleeping and otherwise I'm alone in the house and I'm like brushing my teeth, flossing, doing something. And I'm like, do. And then out the corner of my eye crawls a giant cockroach.
Ew. Oh, hashtag New York.
Yeah. It's like, it's not like so wild that you'd see a cockroach, but like, it's not like I know that they're here and like running around. So like all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God. And I'm alone. I don't know about you guys, but I don't love to be alone with like a big gross bug. Yeah. So then I'm like, I'm upstairs. I don't have any shoes. I'm like, what do I kill it with? Like, I've got to kill it because I'm also about to go to sleep. Right. So I'm like, so now my cortisol is spiked. Anyways, all I have is like a book, which you'd never want to, anyways, so I have to like, well, it was actually one of these, the Chani, the 2025 yearbook.
Oh my God.
But it was like a blank copy because it was something that I had. Anyways, I had to be like, I was actually using it for my dream journal, which makes it weirder. And so I had to like throw the book down on the cockroach and it splatted. And then I had picked the book up and then I had to get a jar to put over it because I was like, I can't dispose of it. I'm going to have to call the exterminator tomorrow. He's also going to want to see what it looks like. All that stuff. So I had a giant cockroach still twitching under a jar at like 11 o'clock at night. I have to like, now I can't sleep in my bedroom. And now I'm like, a little flipped out. Again, it's not like the biggest deal, but what? And then, so I go and my daughter has like a little toddler bed and she also has a crib. So I go and I sleep in her toddler bed. And so I'm in this tiny bed and I'm like, I can't fall asleep because I'm like, ooh, cockroaches everywhere. What if they're everywhere? That kind of thing. And it's like, I can't believe this is happening on the Scorpio full moon. And then I finally get to sleep. And 45 minutes later, I'm like so disoriented. Something's waking me up. My daughter is standing up in her crib and she's pooped. So my sleep was interrupted by a cockroach and some poop. And then of course she stayed up for like another 3 hours. So I basically didn't sleep the night of the Scorpio full moon.
Oh dear.
And of course it was, sitting in opposition to Uranus. So it felt, disruptive to my need for
rest,
moon type rest and all the things. Okay. So, not a big deal, but I was like, this is very on brand.
It's textbook.
It's textbook. So
I
don't know what you all were expecting. I don't know did we cover this in the last episode, but I was like, okay, well, what's the shock and awe of this full moon? What are going to be like the disturbing things that come to the surface that are attached to really deep emotions? Because if something's going to happen in Scorpio, we're going to feel deeply about it. And because it was sitting in opposition to Uranus and the sun and Uranus were coming together over the course of, the next couple of days, that week of May 12th was like, it just seemed really pronounced in terms of the month, like maybe not the year, but definitely for the month. So something that's come to light over the course, not necessarily I do think it was started to come out in the news on the full moon and definitely like right now is hitting like the New York Times and is that a very Scorpio figure, and we're going to be looking at a couple very Scorpio figures, a very, very Scorpio figure. And we didn't mention this word in terms of the sign, but I think you would all agree with me that if you have a lot in Scorpio or Leo or Taurus or Aquarius, you may very well be known for being stubborn and immovable, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
this is a sign, Scorpio, that is emotionally immovable. It's just like, and just immovable, just stubborn, just cannot, it moves when it wants to. So a figure that has impacted many places in the world, definitely the United States, not to talk about presidents all the time, but Mr. President Joe Biden, Mr. Scorpio, like stellium in Scorpio, is having a major couple of weeks. First of all, he got the diagnosis of his cancer was made, like a very progressed, stage cancer, was made public. And then there's this book that's come out about him that is revealing the fact that what we all knew is true. The Democratic Party knew that he was not up for the job. I mean, the world knew, but like people knew that he was too old, he was too declined. Also, you have a major diagnosis come out that says like, oh, you got like really late stage, whatever, dangerous, this is not good cancer. 4 months after the inauguration of the last, like 4 months after he was going to run and be president. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
So Uranus is exactly opposing his sun right now. And this
Right.
all came out during the Uranus cazimi, am I right?
Yes.
As far as the cancer diagnosis emerging into the news.
The cancer diagnosis emerges on the heels of the Uranus cazimi. So Uranus and the sun come together and they bring out some shocking or like something that is unexpected or like out of the blue. But we just have this lunation that's basically like on his sun. We have this full moon on his sun. So it lights up his chart, and sitting right across from it is Uranus. So it's agitating something in his chart. And the book coming out, I mean, the book being published and people starting to talk about the book happening as that full moon is like passing over everything is like a domino effect piece of astrology. Like it's a quick piece of astrology, but that Uranus opposing his sun and Venus is long term, right? It's like something's happening over years. And this book, and there's also these tapes that were leaked that are about an interview he did in 2023 where he like didn't remember things. Like he didn't remember when his son had died, and he didn't remember where, papers were, and he didn't remember who George Clooney was, and their friends at like an event. And so it also made sense why George Clooney came out with an op-ed being like, we cannot have Joe Biden run for president.
Makes sense now. Well, the full moon too in Scorpio, I feel like if the moon is going to illuminate and shed its like moony light on things, it like really revealing the sort of scorpionic things you held close, right? Because we're saying that in the beginning,
Like the secrets,
babe. Like
Scorpio's like, these are the secrets. And then Uranus being across from it's like, ha, no more. here's the secrets revealed.
And also, secret isn't even the right word. It's just like you didn't want to come forth because like we could all see there's something about the sun being there too. Whereas like it was like undeniable that there was something that this person couldn't be the president for 4 more years. And that, so what it did to me is it kind of like just peeled back the kind of like veil of pretend. Like we can't pretend.
And then the other veil that it peels back is that there was an infrastructure around him, which obviously, but the Democratic Party is guilty of propping him up this whole time when it's proven with this book coming out and like all these, and these tapes being leaked, he wasn't able to do the job. And they just let him like muscle through. And look, the reason why I said like stubborn and Scorpio is because that man should have began to pick the next president in 2021. He should have never even entertained the idea of running again. But a Scorpio is going to be fixated on, in the worst case scenario, distorted, is going to be fixated on power. And is going to be immovable once you get on a track. How are you going to get them off? It has to be their own idea. And so the stubbornness and the dedication to power that, this world runs on. And then we end up here. We end up with fascism. We end up with the president we have now because the Democratic Party lied to us and they didn't allow us a democratic process of choosing the next candidate for the Democratic Party.
I agree with all that. And I think obviously people knew early on, and maybe even he knew on some level, or he should have, that he was not fit to run again in 2024. And also, I feel like I'm hearing a lot of people, I think it's unfortunate timing, or maybe it could also be intentional timing, but I think it's unfortunate timing that the cancer diagnosis has come out at the same time as this book, because then it's like, we told you were dying of cancer this whole time, but we don't know that we knew that before. And there is a part of me that thinks it's not really anyone's business when you tell the public that you have that kind of diagnosis.
If you're holding office, it is. It actually is.
But we don't know that he knew that then. He might have.
Okay, but his memory was in decline.
And also he had
like a medical issue.
Trip and fall, like getting onto Air Force One. There's like all these kinds of things.
But
also,
I'm not talking about that.
Okay, I know, I hear you. But listen, can we just say the name of the title of this book? Because it's wild. It's a sick burn. Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. It's so embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing. And it's also like, it's just like, it's like a fairy tale. It's like the myth, like this is the like little thing you take home. What do you call that? The moral of the story is that you do not fucking hang on to power if you want to leave a legacy. You don't hang on to power if you care about the people that you're serving ever, 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 ever. But you certainly don't if you want to be egotistical about it and you want to leave a good legacy either. Like it just doesn't serve you in any kind of way. But that's the demise of having too much Scorpio in your chart. I said it.
Okay, wait. So I agree, but I think all of that is true even without the cancer diagnosis.
Yes, totally. Yeah. But it's just that the cancer diagnosis is connected to the Uranus cazimi that happened as it's opposing his sun, which is about his energy and his life force. And like, obviously it's disrupted and it's all sad. And it's also like, just like not being able to deal with aging and death. Like, can't we be in connection with each other in a way that's like our elders pass on the wisdom, but then the younger people, like younger being 65 to 7, get to like move up in the chain and like share responsibility. And it doesn't have to be one figurehead.
The conversation with death, I mean, it's like you might want to get right with whoever your higher power is when you're in a Pluto opposition. But
he's in a Pluto opposition.
Yeah, he's got that 7-degree Pluto in Leo.
Ooh,
and so it's just
really, like that's like why, because Pluto's getting to what, like 4 this year, 5?
Yeah,
it got to 4.
It got to 4,
or almost 4, 3 something.
Right. So Mars was also on that Pluto as
well, and he has the moon at 0 Taurus.
Yeah.
So the moon is getting sandwiched by Pluto and Mars as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the moon is the body, like literally your physical body. So this is all very literal, and very unfortunate for Joe Biden.
Also, we could just talk about all the things, like the whole thing with Hunter Biden that came out, what was it, in last year? Like, I just feel like the legacy, because the whole legacy and it's kind of like eroding in this like.
Yes. And it has to like this is, again, I'm a broken record, but this is why fascism can get in, is because the people that say, oh, we uphold the law are lying to us and they're also corrupt. And so when the whatever party or group of people that say like, oh no, we're really trying to do good by people are being bought, or, have money in their politics, and they're lying to us about candidates, about what they're doing, about their children, about all of it. It's like, well, yeah, you're lying and you're telling us that you're not lying. And then you're telling us you're better than the liar. And it's like, oh my God, it's just a hall of mirrors.
Burn it all down. I think that should be the title for this episode, by the way. Burn it all down.
May the bridges I burn light the way too.
Oh my
that
God.
saying. But I think that also the Uranus cazimi, like, and this, whole thing and all these conversations we're having about Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, it's just like the shakeup. It's like Uranus is at that late stage degree, conjunct the fixed star Algol, which is about, kind of in a gruesome
Medusa's
way.
head.
It's Medusa's head. So it's like the heads will roll kind of thing. And it does feel like they're having a real reckoning. And also it's the wrong party to have a reckoning right now, but that's what happens when you don't admit like the truth. And then a Scorpio full moon comes around and the truth comes out.
So, I mean, the big thing that I was following last week, and I think we all were, was as the full moon happened on Monday, that was the first day of opening statements for the Diddy trial. So just to like give an overview, and I have notes, so I'll probably be like looking over, but listen. So Diddy is on trial for sex trafficking, racketeering, and conspiracy. So these are like major crimes.
Big.
Could face life in prison.
Right.
So he was involved with Cassie. That's her like musical artist name. Her real name is Cassandra Ventura. She was involved with Diddy from like age 19 for like a decade. And what's come to light is that for the course of their relationship, Sean Diddy Combs would have her engage in these kind of what they're now known as like freak offs. And the details of which, as her testimony started like the second day of this week, so last Tuesday, are like so sordid and like so
horrific.
Absolutely
they're
horrific.
They're grotesque. They're horror. They're just abuse.
Unimaginable, but I can't. She's a survivor. As is every day, the testimony is coming out. And if you just put yourself, you could see in the trial, in the courtroom, there's like Diddy's children. There's all these people who are in the courtroom witnessing Cassie tell her tale about how it wasn't just abuse. It was the fact that everyone around Diddy, this is the conspiracy part, right? Yeah. Enabled this behavior, such things as like scheduling it. There's cash, there's money, there's basically she was in prison. It became her job. She was an aspiring like R&B performer. I mean, she had little bops back in the day. He like basically Diddy took her career and Cassie became basically, I would say, living in a prison with Diddy. Yeah. And all of this is so as this full moon is happening, and it's like kind of like unearthing and bringing to the surface all of these details. I mean, I think that was also the kind of like nausea inducing. It's just like, wow, this isn't insane. How many people knew, right? So there's all this kind of like this infrastructure around him that allowed him to do it to Cassie and who I think two other women, the complaint alleges. At least.
We know, like, I mean, if that one is public, how many more are private?
Yeah. Well, that doesn't include the civil litigations.
Yeah.
I think there's about 50 civil suits, but in the criminal, there's these named people.
Yes. So the full moon happens, and it's like we also know a lot of Cassie's testimony from before, like, and there's been a lot of stories circulated, but all of a sudden it comes back. Like not all of a sudden for them, they knew, but it just so happens to come back on the full moon with this Uranus opposition. And so the internet is just flooded with these horror stories, with these like gruesome accounts of intimate partner violence and all the kinds of sexual assault, all of the kinds of violence.
I was just thinking about, I was like really mindful of like, what news is my daughter following? Because I have a teen daughter, like all the kinds of things that are just now out in the open. And it's been a real week. So here's what I want to do to sort of contextualize it astrologically. We did mention the full moon in Scorpio sort of initiating.
And he's a Scorpio.
He's a Scorpio.
Diddy is a Scorpio. So
Scorpio sun conjunct Neptune in Scorpio.
Yeah. And it just so happens like like Neptune being the planet of illusions and delusions, and also like fantasy. And it's really good for creatives. It makes you, it usually lends a real kind of creative, fantastical element. It makes maybe somebody really good at casting mirages and like putting forth a facade to people and having it be like this big illusion built around them that they're just like a nice guy mogul in the music business. And then when it's interesting because all this stuff starts to activate his Neptune during the course of the last couple of years, and that illusion and delusion starts getting popped and deflated. And
wait, just to follow that thread, what you said a little bit more, I was thinking about even just like the facade, the illusion, the kind of like just the way that, I mean, this is someone who's built their career, but also been like a cultural titan. It's like it went beyond just hip hop. It like put it in a global sphere. It was like celebrities.
Everyone in the Hamptons wanted to be invited to the white party.
Like white party. Yeah. And okay. So if we start with like this full moon moment, I was really looking at also the Mars of it. And so I wanted to do a little bit of astro teaching on the Mars synodic cycle and the one that we're in now. So the Mars synodic cycle is just basically anytime you talk about a planet's synodic cycle, it's like their relationship to the sun. And so for Mars, it will conjunct the sun in a period that takes like 2 years. So there'll be conjunction that kicks it off and then an ending conjunction, otherwise known as a Mars cazimi. And that takes
the cycle takes 2 years.
The
conjunction takes a couple days.
Yes.
Like a day precise, but it'll
those like day conjunct. Yeah, it's like a couple days. Those cazimis for Mars are like bookends to a Mars story that lasts 2 years. And so this Mars cycle began on November 18th, 2023.
When did Cassie bring it?
Cassie filed her federal lawsuit on November 16th, 2023. Mars was basically conjunct the sun. It just hadn't perfected.
Yes.
It hadn't gone exact. And so what is a Mars cazimi? A Mars cazimi is a seeding point. Yeah. It's going to plant a seed in the sign of Scorpio. And
plant a seed of what?
Winning, vengeance. Like I'm gonna go for it. It's gonna leave a mark. And what's interesting to me is that kind of unyielding factor of Scorpio that you were talking before, the fixate. Like he thought, she filed the lawsuit and the next day, I think it settled for 20 million. So I'm sure he thought, I paid it out, it's done.
Right.
And what it did was, because she filed in federal court, it raised the attention of the feds, and they were like, wait a minute. And so that kicks off a period of his arrest that happened, and then later in September of 2024. Yeah. And then earlier this year when the feds raided his home and found reams of tape because he would record all of his freak-offs.
Yeah.
So there's all this evidence that exists. He would use it, by the way, to blackmail her. It's why she could never leave him.
And everybody else. Like there's all these stories of like who else has he blackmailed, and like I don't know what's true and what's not at this point because everybody on the internet says everything, but there's like so-and-so said that he poisoned them. This person said that he poisoned them. This person says that, like there's all of these charges. By the way, as we're talking about Mars, I scratched myself and I'm bleeding.
Oh my gosh.
No. Oh God.
And it's Mars Day. On my white pants.
Just like,
so.
Oh no.
It's fine.
Okay. So that seed point to me for this, like, there's a lot of astrology happening here, I think, with this whole Diddy trial. And Chani, you you like made a prediction the last time when we talked about Diddy being arrested in September 2024.
Oh, and because of the Venus retrograde.
Yeah, we were like, is this going to be a Harvey Weinstein moment? Like, are we going to have a Me Too moment? Yeah. And you were trying to look to this year. So there's a lot of different, you could look at eclipses, you could look at the Venus retrograde. But for me, for this point, I just felt that the Mars piece was really pronounced.
It is.
It was really pronounced. And so it's like, you think you can get rid of me and pay me off, I'll take your money. And then there's still like,
it's out.
There's an vengeance. It's
been punctured.
Here. Yes.
Like Mars punctures something and can, draw fluids, but the mark, like you said, has been made. And I just think it's so like everything that has come out about what he did to her specifically, because that's been the most meta news, is like, yeah, that's what happens to every survivor. And 1 in 3 women will survive severe domestic violence, intimate partner violence. So 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 trans people. This is common. What he did was elevated because of his money and his status and his power. But the tactics he used are used by millions. This is like not everything she said. I was like, of course he did that. Of course he did that. Of course he dangled your career in front of you. Of course he blackmailed you. Of course he had you in an apartment down the street. Of course he had you surveilled. Of course you had to ask for basic human necessities. Of course your life was threatened at every single turn. And we all know that, again, specifically women, but anybody in an intimate partner violence situation, the moment they leave it is the moment that their life is the most at risk. And so not only did she leave, did she find a way to get out, but she came back at, and she didn't, I'm assuming, didn't know it was a Mars cazimi or didn't care, like whatever, but it's like how to plant a seed of something that is also going to be long lasting. Because I would say if you do something in a fixed sign, when we pick charts for things, we want something with a fixed sign ascendant because it has staying power. And so this thorn, this, thing has stuck, and it has hopefully has really like potent levels of staying power so that other people don't have to be negatively impacted by his actions. I mean, I don't know what'll happen, whatever, but
yeah. I mean,
wild.
I think wild. And this Mars cycle, the bookend to this chapter is going to happen in January 2026 when Mars cazimi is in Capricorn in the beginning of next year.
So do you think that something will wrap up by then?
I think so. That's like my prediction. I think there is a victory. I mean, I think that there's a...
Do you think that because the next Mars cazimi is also in such a good quote unquote sign, because the next Mars cazimi is in Capricorn?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Mars will be exalted and it'll be conjunct Venus. So it feels like it's about like women, femmes.
Oh my God. I didn't even
remember
until you said that. I know the Venus, Mars, cazimi, all of them are like, yes, that would be, that would be very satisfying to have there be some kind of win.
And I just want to connect the dots for people. Are you saying that, so this seed that was planted last November 2023?
Yes.
November 2023. It's coming to light now in the trial because
Scorpio full moon? Yes, thank you, Eliza. Yeah, the full moon in Scorpio was within 3 degrees of where the Mars cazimi happened. So it feel like that seeding point, it kind of just like blew it up into... It fruited.
Yeah.
It ripened. It's in our face.
Thea, how often do we have a Mars cazimi in Scorpio?
I think it alternates. So the last one we had, it could either be like 30 some years or 15 years, depending. But the last time,
it's really rare.
It was 1991. Before the 2023 one, it was in November of 1991. Yeah. And there were just like a couple other threads in the news that I also was like, oh, that's weird. That's so 1991. Like the Anita Hill testifying at Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearings happened technically in October 1991, but the whole cultural impact, what it means to be sexually harassed at work, all these sorts of things were like all on
especially
trial
back then, because we didn't have social media, so we had to literally wait for the news to catch up, and then like 60 Minutes to do a special on it or whatever.
It was a slower kind of and so I just think that there was something parallel about these dynamics of like having a world stage to talk about these issues in a court of law or in, testifying before Congress, what have you, where you get to tell your story in that way that felt very kind of rhymed with this moment.
Can I also say something about that, about Anita Hill and Cassie? Because there's something here about there's, yes, the cazimi, which is a really powerful moment for that planet. And when that planet's in its own sign, it's like, ooh, this is like a really potent, powerful Mars moment. So it's a powerful, potent moment for fighting and winning and strategizing and getting through and like making a mark and doing something that's really hard, I would say, because it's a malefic. So it's good at doing hard things when it's in a good position. And also the sun being a signifier of rulers or leaders, and then that Mars coming in and being like poking it. So both Clarence Thomas and Sean Combs being, I know Clarence Thomas is still very much in power, whatever, but he will go down in history with that Anita Hill story. And we all know, and all the other, whatever. But both of those kind of like powerful men, like Supreme Court and super celebrity, star, being punctured in that same Mars cazimi.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about like the significance
Do you agree with
of the
that?
sun. Yeah, no, I do.
What else was connected to that cazimi?
So like, yeah, in 1991, it was great because that's Nelson Mandela really consolidated his power around the Mars cazimi. And that like really helped to end apartheid and bring him into power. That all happened around the November 1991.
I think that's another good phrase, a consolidation of power. Would you say that?
Yeah.
About Mars cazimi and and Scorpio.
Weirdly enough, South Africa was in the news also last week because turns out we're welcoming
white supremacy.
white South Africans to this country. We're not letting anyone else in. But if you're a white South African, because Trump is like really taken with this, I would call it a conspiracy theory where he says there's like reverse racism towards white South Africans and they're being like killed in mass or something. Like the farming population, and he wants to bring them in. Right. And so there's a really bizarre, like on May 9th, where we welcomed like families, quote, as refugees. And Marco Rubio showed up and they were all at the airport. There was this huge photo op. And it just, I was like, this shit is so weird.
That shows you how much they're losing. It shows you how weak that, yes, I do. I bear with me. I'm not saying that we're winning. But I am saying that they know how much they're losing the story around immigration and around ICE and around how brutal and inhumane they're being. And I'm not saying they're not going to get away with mass evil, because they are and they will. But when they do things like that, it's a desperate attempt to be a conspirator, be like a purveyor of conspiracy theories, because anything to do with white supremacy or it's all a conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah.
But they do that kind of posturing when they know they're losing something in the culture war.
Yeah.
It was wild to listen to their rationale. It was like their territory is being taken from them. Their homes are being stolen. The people are being killed. Like,
doppelganger.
Where else is that happening?
Naomi Klein's doppelganger. It's exhausting. It's so boring. It's so basic. It's like,
it's egregious. The hypocrisy is egregious. It's like, I feel like there might have been a time maybe where politicians in public weren't so obviously contradicting themselves on an hourly
dictators
basis.
do. That's
exactly.
Right? That's like base level. That's the floor for dictators, ground level.
Yeah.
And also somebody who's like, America first, and we can't take foreign anything, but yes, give me your $400 million plane. Thanks, Qatar.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. 100%. But do you think that they're doing this for the photo op to be like, hey, we welcome people in as well? Or do you think it's replacement theory? They just want more white people. Okay.
It's about spinning. It's about always taking control of the narrative and spinning it in the way that they want. And so anything that they do that is so big and so posturing is about doing that. It is I mean, at least that's a theory out there by a lot of journalists and a lot of people that are like pontificating upon where the hell we are and what's actually going on, is that when they do things like that, those stunts, they're just like that says that they are actually acknowledging that they're losing like public opinion.
So desperate.
She's so desperate. So the wild thing about that week, about last week, and like Diddy's trial happening, was that there was these other trials that were also happening that were about either sexual assault or murder. Again, we won't dwell on them, but Gerard Depardieu was convicted for sexual assault. The Mendez brothers were back in court. And this was all within like a couple of days of each other.
Mm-hmm. And a high profile case in Canada where 5 former players for the junior national hockey team, for Team Canada, they're currently on trial for sexual assault. And right over the Scorpio full moon, it was when the person who had come forward, whose name hasn't been released to the public for her own protection,
Oh, wow.
she was she had to be on like cross-examined essentially for 9 days,
Oh
because
my
they each
God.
had 2 lawyers. So she had to go through all of these lawyers.
Oh my God.
It's like truly grueling and awful.
Very, yeah. I would say grueling for a Scorpio full moon too.
Yes. That's been big news in Canada. And this was all happening around the exact same time frame, all involving one way or another sexual violence. Including with the Mendez brothers.
Oh, really? Because
they claimed that their father had abused
his dad.
them.
That's why they had to. Yeah, that's why they killed him.
So I would like to almost not reframe this, because I think it's very important to keep the frame, but we end up spending so much time on the people that do harm, which obviously that's important. But then it's like, how do we center survivors? How do we center the people that have had to come through? Because in the wake of all of these people, like anybody who's done harm that there's a trial brought against them, you know that there is just a arena of people that have been harmed that will never come forward. And then you know that for every person that is brought to trial that we even hear about, there's a gajillion others that we'll never hear about, that'll never get brought to any kind of even like community trial. Like, I'm not a litigious person. I'm not a carceral person. I don't believe in it, but I really believe that like we have to hold each other accountable. So
for sure.
It's like, how are the survivors of these things like 9 days on trial because of what? Like, why does that person who has already survived the most heinous of things be brought through that kind of grueling process again? Like, the whole situation is, and I think a lot of people believe Cassie, and I think a lot of people don't. A lot of people are like, well, why then? And how then? And if she did, then blah, 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 blah,
that was all going around. That was like really kind of weird. Like, I was like, oh, there are people who still, after seeing videotape and like, they still don't. So it's not about belief. It's not about proving.
Yes. It's about like, the fact that we cannot contend with men aging and dying and being absolutely incompetent for their job and causing that much harm and doing time for it. And again, I don't mean that in a carceral way. I mean, like, we can't contend with these like superstar hero figures, presidents, pop stars, whatever, being confronted with the actual harm that they've done. We can't, because patriarchy doesn't allow us to do that. We have to be within this construct of them being all powerful and all knowing in a way. It's like, you can see how it inhibits us from actually ever creating a just and fair world.
I wish for a world where it was just like, that there's justice by telling the truth, that we could believe people, but there wasn't the burden of needing to prove and share your deepest, darkest trauma on a stage.
Right. For everyone to gawk at and pick apart.
Yeah. Like, I wish there was a kind of a different way. I mean, I think we're also feeling the constraints of what it means. Like, because what's the remedy? It's like, it's the legal process. Mm-hmm. It's the carceral process. Mm-hmm. It's like all of that.
So oddly, another rock star, the celebrity person who got, charged for something during this full moon in Scorpio was Chris Brown, who was charged for alleged assault that he allegedly committed in 2023 in London, and is currently being held he's currently incarcerated in London. So that also happened like 2 days after the full moon. So it's just this like wild compiling of all of these people that have committed all of these atrocities and also continue to, because as we know, Chris Brown has been in the news for this for many times for, I don't know, decades now. But I just also want to say, like, I thought so much about Cassie and every person, every woman like her, and just the absolute tremendous power of what she did.
Yeah.
Nobody else did that. She did that.
Mhm.
And she was young. When it happened, she was a child. Her brain wasn't fully developed when they got together.
Yep.
And she was young when she did it. And she's now on the stand, so pregnant.
8 months pregnant.
It's just like, oh my God, like the power that she has
Yeah.
and that she's connected to, and the power of the actions that she's taken. And God bless every survivor that comes forward or doesn't, you know.
I thought of that actually with like, this was in the chart that you shared on our group chat, Thea. This isn't in the chat we showed because we don't have the asteroids there yet. But wasn't that Mars cazimi right next to Ceres as well? I feel like I saw that.
In 2023?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
But that just, because I've thought of that when seeing like images of her pregnant.
Abduction.
And I'm almost wondering if there was she wouldn't have been pregnant then, but she has a kid already, right?
I don't know.
And I just wonder if there's a part of her this is pure projection, but I wonder if there's a part of her that's also doing this for future generations. And
well, it does.
And is like, withstanding all of this horror.
Right.
As a gift for future girls, for future people being born into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ceres, the asteroid goddess, for a lot of reasons, has to do with that loss of innocence.
Yes.
Or
being taken into being stolen.
Being stolen.
Yeah. Taken into Diddy underworld.
Yeah. I've been thinking about Ceres. So yes, you're right. Ceres was conjunct that Mars cazimi. And I was also thinking about Ceres recently because it's right next to Saturn at that last degree of Pisces.
Really?
So, yeah.
Talk about reaping. Both Saturn and Ceres are very much about the reaping of the field.
Yeah. They both have like scythes in their symbols.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And is the rage of the mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ceres is like the great mother archetype, among other things.
Yeah.
Also, this
her daughter's been abducted, which is just another aspect of self. And she rages and she withholds food. And there's, this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, to Eliza's point, Cassie's husband came out with a statement where he said that, like, the son that is on the way that will now be welcomed into a world that is now safer because of his mom. And so just also speaking to that kind of like great mother energy of doing something for the greater good and having that strength to do it. And he also said, I did not save Cassie, as some has said. That would be an insult to her. She's done the painful work and has saved herself. So that one really moved me too.
Well, that's the kind of partnership you need to be in. Like everyone needs to know that if they have the resources that they need, of course that's the only way. We all have power. We all need to be resourced enough to be able to save ourselves. I think one of the other fascinating things that happened over the Scorpio full moon is this like really huge plantation burned down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's why the name of the episode is Burn It Down.
Appropriate.
Yeah. So the Nottoway Plantation burned down.
The which
May
one?
15th. It's called Nottoway. It's in Louisiana. But
not
a
way.
It's not a way. There's so many jokes.
It's not the way.
Listen, the plantation burned down to the ground. Yes. It was 166 years old. It was the oldest antebellum plantation. Louisiana, when you talk about plantations, you're talking about sugar, right? Because it's off the Gulf. It's like off the coast. So it's like a perfect climate. And I've actually done a lot of research about this time period, about slavery and plantations on like the South, like where the Gulf of Mexico is. So like all the kind of land that abuts it. And so basically, if you were an enslaved person and you went to either like the Sugar Bowl of Texas or Louisiana to be enslaved and to farm sugar, it was a death sentence. Like it was the highest mortality rate. Like it was really, it was really
brutal
bad.
Work.
Like,
yeah.
because it was so hot and you're like knee deep in like watery, marshy fields. And sugarcane can grow up to like, 6-8 feet. Like it's huge.
Yeah.
They're like really big bamboo, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And okay, so there's that. That's where this person, I was looking into a bit of the history, which is all over TikTok. Thank you, TikTok historians.
Yeah,
Love
I
you.
know, right? Amazing.
I was like, okay, got it. Got the summary.
Yeah.
And so really just being like this person who started the plantation in Louisiana, like basically tripled his family's wealth on the backs of enslaved people. Okay, flash forward to now. This place, right before it burned down, was marketed online as like a wedding venue, like a resort.
Can you imagine?
I mean, I bet people got married there. Like that's
Yeah, they did.
appealing.
They
That's
did.
appealing to some people.
Yeah.
They don't care, I think, is like they
Yeah, I
really
think a lot
don't.
of
They
people
want the
don't care.
Instagram photo.
Well, this is like, so
It's
basically
such a horror. It's such a horror.
Yeah.
all the atrocities, the worst kind of place. Like, okay, so it catches fire.
Ghosts.
So the ancestors are like, we just gotta take it. This is burning down. And the reaction to me, the most compelling part, or the part I felt like really healed about, is just like seeing everyone's reaction online about the burning down. I was like, yeah, like just everybody being like, it had to go. Like, especially Black folk. Now there's other people who are really upset, but then those people are being lampooned.
Wow.
Because there's other plantations in our country where they don't tell the story.
Yeah.
Where they treat it as if it's a destination. And
not
there's
for like historic learning. Like it's not like a memorial museum.
No.
It's for
and
weddings.
so this plantation burned. And I was thinking a lot about Neptune and Aries. So Neptune, the stories that we tell ourselves. Listen, I mean, the education in a lot of places in this country is like a white man's like fantasy. And especially when you get to the South and it's like, this is a part of, antebellum. It has like this whole Gone with the Wind kind of like allure and all of this kind of romance. And it's just like, can we just talk about what happened? Can we just like have our education be on that? And then maybe we won't be haunted by the shit anymore.
Yeah.
Literally, like, haunted by the people in the White House at the moment that are still somewhat alive, although soulless, or haunted literally by
possessed
ghosts.
I mean, every single plantation should be handed over to the descendants of the people that worked there. No one should prosper financially.
Yeah.
That is white, or that is like, like from a plantation. Like that is beyond egregious. And
whole towns, whole economies that still exist today. Anyway, so I was really thinking about Neptune and Aries and being like, just burn it like this. Let's just like, if there was something about this what we're all talking about, whether you believe in like spirits or ancestors or whatever. I mean, I do, Hoodoo Queen, but listen, like if it's just like there's something that we're talking about, like, spiritually there's something and it just goes ablaze. And you have Neptune, the stories that we tell in the sign of cardinal fire. It just felt really like I wonder if there will be any other kind of historical reckonings, or at least reckoning with the stories we tell ourselves about this country. The fantasies that we tell ourselves, and a reality check to those once Saturn in a couple days goes into Aries. It's getting edgy, I know.
Well, and I have to say too, like, so you said this plantation's 166 years old?
Yes.
And Neptune cycle is 165 years.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But I looked, Neptune, it was technically built when Neptune was built. So the plantation, I looked at the chart, was like Neptune was in Pisces, like late Pisces.
But it's just still, had its Neptune return.
It's a Neptune return.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So it's still like on that precipice.
Yeah.
So I think it's relevant.
And that was the seed in like Neptune and Aries was when we had the Civil War, which obviously was about people's rights to have a plantation and not to be having to be on a plant. Like,
Yeah.
Right. So like the connection there.
All very relevant.
I like that. That's a very positive take on Neptune and Aries. I've been thinking about
Go
Neptune
on,
and Aries
Gus.
as like this like hyper blown up, distorted like delusion about the savior hero complex and just being like, oh God, it just feels so overblown right now.
It could be all of the above.
It's all of the
Yeah.
above. It's a mix of all of it.
Yeah.
There was a couple of things that you just made me think about that are tied to all of this. This is one of the most heartbreaking, most enraging things that is happening on the planet right now, and has been happening for 80, 100 years, but is in such an acute crisis right now. But as you were talking, I was relating it to the Scorpio full moon, and because the story really started to circulate at that time. So it was the anniversary of the Nakba in Palestine. And at the same time, world organizations were talking about the fact that they are on the brink of a famine because Israel is refusing to let in the thousands of food and aid trucks that are sitting at the border. So they are literally purposefully causing a genocide in many ways, and now specifically through famine. Although I will say that right before we started recording, they said they'd let in 100 aid trucks, which like whatever. But there's also a number being put out right now that like in the next 48 hours from taping this, if aid trucks don't get in, like 14,000 babies, children, or won't make it. So we're in this like particularly ongoing and poignantly gruesome, horrific, settler colonialist, man-made horror. And the fact that like we don't need to tie any astrology to it ever, because it is what it is. And the fact that Saturn and Ceres are also sitting at that last degree, and Ceres is the goddess of the grain.
Yeah.
And it
I didn't
can
think
be
of
about
that.
withholding food, and Saturn
Yeah.
is also an agricultural connect. There's a big agricultural connection to Saturn, and when they're at the end, it's like this really edgy, not great place. And so like the limiting of food to Gazans, to Palestinians, and is just so, it feels so acute with this moment and that astrological signification. So I just wanted to name that, and that I'm looking to see like what are we doing? What is happening? Like how are we as a globe refusing things to Israel, to that power structure?
I mean, who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
No one has done enough.
Yeah. No,
No one has
obviously.
done like anywhere near
Anything.
enough. But
Yeah.
they did announce yesterday that, so again, we're recording this on May 20th. I think it was yesterday. They announced that Canada, the UK, and France had all committed to either sanctioning or doing some kind of giving Israel some kind of consequences if they continue their offensive on Gaza, and or if they don't let more aid trucks in. They should have done that a long time ago. I feel like people have made these threats before and it hasn't happened. So I'm not holding my breath, but it was still hopeful to me that they committed to doing so, or at least publicized a desire to do so, or an intention to do so. That's better than doing nothing. It still doesn't feel like enough, and it doesn't feel like this. Again, we're 2.5 years into this?
Into this
and how many people have
iteration.
died? So
we don't even know.
But I'm glad that's at least
right.
And then you're just at least people talking about
it's that. So confounding how the whole world doesn't just be like, nope, sorry, nothing. You're literally starving a population. You get nothing. And there was like this moment of like pushback when there was the fires in Israel that happened as the Mars-Pluto opposition perfected. It was this really wild thing because in LA, the fires happened as the Mars, like days after the Mars-Pluto opposition perfected in January. And what was really just like, a lot of things are disturbing about all the places that these fires happen and the histories of them. One of them is like, indigenous people do not shepherd the land in the ways that anymore. They're being, that those rights are taken away from them. And if they were shepherding the land, we would have controlled burns and fires would not get out of control like they do. And, we would not be here in so many ways. And also the non-native tree species, the palm tree, is not native to California. And those were going like up in flames, literally. And so it was like these symbols of colonization because settlers thought, oh, cute, we'll do palm trees here.
Yeah.
And those just like are matchsticks. And then the same thing happens in Israel. So Israel did this. One of the gajillions of horrific things that they do is they rip up ancient olive groves.
That's so
and
sad.
They plant pine trees. And they did this in the beginning of the state so that European Jews would feel at home. And like, I have a tree, I hope it burned down, planted in my name, because that's how they got American Jews to invest in Israel back in the, 40s, 50, like late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s when I was born. And my grandmother, bought a tree for me, put in my name.
Whoa.
And now, after these many years, I'm like, oh, that means that in my name, an olive tree was uprooted. They planted pine forests over ancient Palestinian villages. And those are the things that went up in flames during that Mars-Pluto opposition. And the reason why I'm like tying this in is, yes, it's astrological. It happened as we were filming our last episode. But also Israel asked, the world for help. And there was a lot of talk online about how a lot of nations were like, no, we're not going to help you.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like plants don't grow, like nature is so much smarter than we are. And so the plants that grow naturally are not going to be the ones that are matchsticks. Or, I mean, some of them might be, but not in the same way. It's like when we have these targeted growth campaigns for different reasons, for aesthetic reasons or for colonial reasons, it just alters the biosystem.
And then the other thing that happened at that Mars-Pluto opposition, which this full moon was connected to, because then it was like sitting in a square to the loosening Mars-Pluto opposition. But during the Mars-Pluto opposition, India and Pakistan attacked each other. And it's like a major, sent major reverberations through the world. It's a huge deal. They have a long history of conflict and abuse and all the things. And they're in a, what I would say, I don't believe in any ceasefires now because it's who knows what's going to happen next kind of thing. But apparently they're, as we're recording this, I think still engaging in a ceasefire. But that astrology is very connected to the history of the partition and the astrology of the partition. And I think basically if we boil it all down, the chart for partition is having its Pluto opposition.
Yeah.
Like Joe Biden.
Oh my gosh. Just Joe Biden's as old as partition.
Yes. That's how you stop running for president. There were some other pieces of astrology too.
Yeah, I mean, it was during an exact Saturn-Pluto conjunction. This is not what we're living in now, so it feels a little off topic, but it's still a very potent conjunction. Saturn and Pluto do not come together very often. The last time we did that was COVID. Then when they came together in the 1980s, the early 80s, that was the AIDS epidemic. And so this was one that happened in the 1940s.
Yes. Okay. So the other thing that was really disastrous and an outage, and we've been talking a lot in our group chats about the fact that there's been a lot of power outages that have been seemingly connected to Uranus at the late degrees of Taurus. And over the course of the weekend, when we had the Uranus cazimi, a horrific, accident, obviously anyway, it was bad. A couple people passed away because of it, but an accidental power outage was responsible for a ship.
So a Mexican ship that was, I believe the whole idea was that they were going to tour around the world and kind of show that they were allies and friends with the world.
Oh God.
And they got to New York and there was a power outage. The captain lost control. The rudder wasn't going where the rudder should go. And the ship crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge.
Which has never happened before in the history of the Brooklyn Bridge. So it was like this weird freak accident that happened as the Uranus cazimi was going on. And 2 people were killed and 22 people were injured.
What I continue to just like hum and haw over is just, yes, Uranus cazimi. Yes.
Right.
So Uranus is a planet that we associate with electricity, among other things. It's people, this is very anecdotal, but people I've known who have Uranus on the ascendant, like literally just get shocked all the time. Like they have little electric shocks. There's just something about Uranus that is very electric in and of itself. But it was also, this cazimi took place within 1 degree of the fixed star Algol. And Algol is known as the blinking star because it literally like turns off and on. It blinks off and on every couple of days. For this reason, the ancients interpreted it as a demon star. But it is also associated with power going in and out. I remember when Caitlin Kopic was making the Algol material for Sphere and Sundry, her Instagram was full of like flickering lights because she was making the material and literally like the power was going in and out. And weird. So there is a connection between like that the essence of Algol, Medusa's head.
Because it's like the eye opening and closing. Did you already say that?
Yes. The blinking star, the blinking demon star. But because it's the head of Medusa, it also represents this like feminine rage, this like deep, holy rage, but especially
is that what's
especially
happening
femme rage? We'll get there.
But I do like that for the Cassie trial, and it's like there's that part of that that's I will take you fucking down. Necessary for this moment.
But not only is it like boats crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge, but you're having radar outages at major airports across the U.S.
Do you want to talk about the flights?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking of is the air traffic control just being in shambles, and especially at Newark. So they've had 3 outages in the last 2 weeks.
We were having our
recording.
We were having our on-site staff not retreat during it.
People were having to be deplaned and get on new planes.
Yeah. Sorry,
and then there was one recently in Denver. So the state of flying in America right now is frankly terrifying.
Yes. And obviously thanks to Trump, but
one of the contributing factors is they're moving the air traffic controllers to cheaper cities because they can't, an air traffic controller on an air traffic controller's wage cannot live in New York. So they moved them to Philadelphia. And it's those systems, like the telecommunications line that is getting the info to their center in Philadelphia off-site, that's shutting down. And it means they cannot communicate with the pilots. They cannot see where the planes are going. So this is terrifying.
Can I just say that as we're talking about all this flashing, blinking, my auto exposure keeps going off and on.
I was getting ready to say
my light is
some Algol in here.
Yeah, as if you're listening to this and you can't see me, I keep being overexposed, underexposed, and I can't control it.
It's literally blinking off and on.
I'm so bright now. Yeah. Anyways, okay, sorry. I just had to say that.
And I was just going to say how stunning that was with the watchtower kind of imagery of the FAA needing to have eyes on the air and communicate, but it going out 90 seconds of drop time with a pilot. Terrifying.
So scary.
Oh my God. Scary. I didn't even know that. I makes me want to vomit.
It's 90 seconds. That's happened several times now. And you literally have air traffic controllers having panic attacks and going on leave because they're like, I can't do this anymore. And which I don't blame them, but also we need people doing that job if we are going to continue to fly as a people.
So let's talk about travel and what was connected to travel and the story about Trump getting a plane and the story about all these disastrous travel things and also things about education. One of the things that happened and the law. The law. I miss her. Connected to all that is that Jupiter, planet of law and travel and education and spirituality, religion, high new pope, is in the sign of its detriment or its exile. So it means that all those things have a harder time right now. It's also sitting in a square currently. Last week it perfected to the nodes, the places where eclipses happen. So we know that like I think about planets squaring the nodes as being like in a pivotal moment, like, ooh, it's maybe connected to what happened 3 months ago. What will happen 3 months. It's in a flickering kind of like maybe power outage, or maybe like, oh, I've got to make a decision that's going to like impact me for a long time. We call it, modern astrologers call it being at the bends. That's modern, right?
Yeah, it's modern.
Yeah, the
It's modern.
bendings.
The bendings, bendy. So Jupiter only squares the nodes. How often?
Ooh, I was meant to research that.
Eliza, this has never happened. Speaking of good students.
Wow. And professors. Yes.
So sorry.
Professor Robertson. Okay.
I
but
can
like,
look it up quick right now.
it's definitely not every year. It's not every, I think it's like probably I'm going to guess like every 4 years.
I'll get back to you. Hold please.
Okay, so last week, amidst the Scorpio full moon and the Uranus cazimi, we also had Jupiter, struggling through Gemini, and then at the bends, or in this square to the nodes. So it at a moment where it's like, oh, what's going to happen in terms of the courts, in terms of education, in terms of religion, in terms of law. So we had all of these court cases that we already detailed that were very connected to the Scorpio full moon because they all had to do with really horrific things, but also all these court cases were in the news, and that's very Jupiter. And then we had the major case that went to the Supreme Court about birthright citizenship, which the Trump administration is, doing. I've listened to different pundits about this and different like experts, and the Trump administration does things sometimes for shock and awe, and sometimes to just throw spaghetti at the wall, and then sometimes just to see what they can get away with. Mm-hmm. So trying to see in terms of the context of what that case means, how far they can push the courts. So like with Trump, with a lot of stuff, he doesn't really care what he wins as much as what he can find out about where the cracks in the system are, it seems like he's such a sun Uranus born on a eclipse person, where he's just like, what can I break?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What can
and
I
if
destroy?
I don't, if you think I'm losing, you don't understand what I'm doing, because I'm literally just banging on everything, and I'll find the weak situation and I'll exploit it. And that's what I mean. The birthright citizenship is obviously very detailed and complex, and has a lot of nuance to it. But that was what I was listening to, something on the New York Times, and they were like, legal analysts believe that the court may set language that expands presidential power, especially for Trump, likening it to the most transformative legal shift since FDR. So it's about the kind of power that the president can expand. Right. So whether or not they win this case, it doesn't matter. What he's seeking to do, some people think, is just figuring out how and where he can expand his power.
I'm coming back in with the answer. It's every 4 years.
Thank you. Nice. Oh, it's right.
The lunar nodes every
Hey, that's my wobbly math. I'm good at wobbly math. I'm not good at precise math.
You were really good.
Thank you. Okay. So the other thing that we had in terms of two other things, and then we'll talk about the kind of big thing, but this has been happening for a while, obviously, but all these stories started to break last week as Jupiter, planet of education and teachers and professors and students, was making a square to the nodes, that like ChatGPT is so everywhere that students don't know how to write papers anymore because they just get the robots to do it for them. And also, so we were not going to have like a thinking class of people, or, a group of people that know how to think critically for themselves and problem solve. And like there's all these like articles, like, what is education? What actually is it for? And what do we, and then there's a student that is bringing a case against a university because they realized that their professor was grading their papers using ChatGPT. And she was like, I shouldn't be paying tuition for this. I could feed my paper to the machine myself and get the exact same thing, which is what she did, which is how she figured out that that's what was happening, I believe.
Yeah. So it's kind of embarrassing because the teacher had left in some of the questions to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So she
If
got
you're going
the
to cheat,
questions.
man, cheat good, cheat better.
That was on, I believe it was slides. So there's like a scale because in that one where this was a student at Northeastern University, I believe it was a class presentation or slides, and ChatGPT had gone in there, and there were traces. There were clear traces. I will say that instructor was an adjunct instructor. Adjunct
Was a
instructors
what?
are adjunct. So I'll
Adjunct
define
is what I would
adjunct.
say, yeah.
Sorry, adjunct.
Adjunct.
Is that Canadian?
That might just be me.
It's Elysian.
I won't
Adjunct.
claim that for Canada.
Yeah.
But adjunct, also known as sessional here in Canada, and in the UK, there's another name. But these are teachers who don't have a permanent contract. They literally get paid course by course.
And they never get paid enough.
In many, many, many universities,
They're overworked.
They don't even get paid a living wage.
Yeah.
So they don't have much like support for grading or for any kind of teaching. So and no institutional support, no benefits.
Right.
So I don't blame them, honestly.
No.
In that way. And
they should only have as much work as they can do, and they should be paid enough to be able to live in the cities that they're teaching in.
Yes. And I agree. You don't want to spend God knows how much tuition is at Northeastern. Tens, 20, like $100,000, whatever.
Yeah.
For ChatGPT to grade your paper. That was another case. There was a case where the teacher had again left accidentally in the comments. Here's the grading scale. Can you say something nice to this person? And the student had gotten an A, but she was like, this is embarrassing.
Oh my God.
So that is bad. Like, that's not ideal. But I mean, aren't doctors using ChatGPT though? Like we all, everyone is.
What are they,
like
what it makes me think though is that like humans, the human touch is going to be elite.
Yeah.
Wait, say more.
Well, if we can get the robots to do anything, but anybody could get the robot to do the thing that another person is getting the robot to, then the human touch becomes elite. It becomes the thing. Like there's something about craftsmanship actually mattering in a world where a robot can do anything, but it's only going to do it as well as a robot can do it. It's never going to have the human touch. So I just think it's like
soft sell for the Chani app. Chani.
Yeah. Humans write your horoscope. Humans write and say everything in the Chani app. No robots are involved. But as Pluto goes into Aquarius and like settles into Aquarius, I just think that this is going to be more and more and more and more and more and more.
And like, Uranus and Gemini, which
oh my God,
it's about to all get.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But
with Jupiter in another air sign and is like kind of a precursor in a way for not really, but a little bit.
Especially squaring the nodes.
Yes.
Because that's like a big moment. It's a fateful moment for Jupiter.
Yeah.
Right.
Gemini.
That's a good way to say it. A fateful moment for Jupiter things. Okay. The other Jupiter square the nodes thing that happened this week is we got a new Pope.
We got a new Pope. Yes. So Pope Leo was named on March 8th. And I mean, I don't know. I think the jury's out on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like this Pope,
well, it's a Pope thing. So
it's a
let's just
thing.
put it in category of like major power structure
of Catholicism. Yeah.
Patriarchy times a gajillion.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it could have been way worse. I think that when I heard the Pope was American, I remember we were at the retreat. I remember Audrey was like, it's American. And I remember my first thought was, oh God, is this like JD? Is JD Vance the Pope?
He wishes.
He does.
That's what he cosplays at home.
Oh my God, I bet. I actually bet.
He's got that hat. I know you do, JD.
Anyway, it's not like he's that bad. So he chose, first of all, he chose the name Leo. He's named himself after Leo the 13th, who was the Pope presiding over the Industrial Revolution.
Oh God.
And
Which was the last time we had Pluto in Aquarius.
Right. Oh, I didn't even think of that.
That's fascinating.
Right. Totally right. But this Pope was very in favor of worker rights as everything was being industrialized. So it sounds like one of his inspirations is in this world of AI, actually very relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
How can we still support workers? How can we support migrants?
Yes.
He has been very critical, at least his Twitter account, his former Twitter account had been very
formerly on Twitter known as not Pope,
had been
not Twitter.
Very critical of Trump and Vance's immigration policies. He was also very sympathetic, from what I understand, with the murder of George Floyd and also with the protests that followed. So again, like not the worst
Mixed
case
bag.
scenario.
Yeah.
Also apparently had swept sexual abuse under the rug.
Yeah, helped to cover it up. And is anti-LGBTQ. So but again, I feel like to expect complete progressiveness from a pope, it's like going to McDonald's and wanting an organic farm salad or something. It's just not where you're going to find that. Yeah.
And his speech that he gave, was this at, I'm not Catholic. I'm going to get the words wrong. I don't know if this was at Mass or if this was like homily. I think that was a word that was used. There was a speech that he gave.
I don't know.
He
gave a speech at an important moment in the ceremony.
In the ritual.
He was leading a ritual.
In the ritual.
In the speech at the ritual, he had basically was saying like he wanted a ceasefire in Gaza and he wanted there to be peace between Ukraine and Russia. So again, I feel like that's positive. He also gave JD Vance a sculpture that said peace is a fragile flower, which to me feels like an underhanded
dumb. Anyways,
yeah.
But he also gave that to not to Zelensky. It sounds like to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, which is confusing to me.
Maybe to Russia. Least that's what I had read. It should maybe Putin. I don't know that Putin was invited. Actually, I don't think he got any gifts.
I don't think Putin would care
Catholic?
about a pope.
Yeah, I don't think he's Catholic.
Yeah.
But in terms of the chart, really the main thing is Jupiter is in the 9th house.
Wait, what is the chart of? The time of, sorry.
Of when he was chosen, of when he was announced to the world, when Pope Leo was born. Not literally born. Sorry. I mean, literally like the Pope.
Well, it's interesting because he changes his name like all popes do.
Yeah.
But then you have a problem when trans people do it. Or you don't legitimize
100%.
their identity.
Their name changes. Yeah.
Okay. So the chart is?
The chart has Libra rising and Jupiter is in the 9th house. I thought it was interesting because this is an American pope and the ruler of the chart, because it's Libra rising, is Venus. And Venus is in its sign of exile in Aries. So this is the first time there's been an American pope. It's not... He is a little bit not really at home in Rome, I would say, in the Vatican.
Which is how you would describe a planet in the opposite sign. It's like not, definitely not your home.
But trining Mars. So they're trining the ruler of Aries. So it's like he's being received. He's welcome by Rome, but he's not totally at home there. He's got Neptune and Aries also right on the descent, or not on the descendant, but in the 7th house opposite the moon. And that also, we were speaking about Neptune before, about like, having this, casting a spell and having this enchantment over people. And, but Neptune can also just speak to religiosity, I think, like to spirituality and just like this message that spreads around. But
and
really,
love,
Aries,
like the two
and
of
love.
them, Venus and Neptune.
Peace. In Aries, they're
trying.
Peace in Aries. Peace in Aries. But the biggest like on the nose thing was just Jupiter, because Jupiter could represent literally the Pope. It represents like people of the law and spirituality. In the 9th house, the house of spirituality and religion and
of churches,
among other churches. So this was just very
Vaticans.
much like
the very on the nose
says it is that the tin
Astro obvious.
Astro obvious.
I think it's a really good chart for choosing a pope.
For
the white smoke.
Yeah.
But there's like theories that the Catholic Church dabbles in astrology.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What
Interesting.
religious institution hasn't at some point?
Yeah. I like the moon, like about to oppose the chart ruler. I think it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And a Libra moon is
Mm-hmm.
pacifying for a leader who's supposed to bring some peace.
No, this 8th house sun feels very like, it might just be like, it's not about me. Like, it's really like this, the identity thing of, yeah, there's interesting. It'd be interesting to see how his papacy plays out. Like coming back to this chart.
Hey,
but yeah, Pope Leo
papacy.
with Mars and Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. He's Pope Leo with Mars and Leo.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, we didn't even go, like, we filmed the last episode, like, not even a full month ago. So this is just what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
It's a
lot. Blah, blah, blah. We talked a lot. Okay. So what we are looking at coming up is, by the time you get this episode, Saturn will be in Aries. It hasn't been there in, 20 something years, almost 30 years. And it is one of the major moments of 2025. It is massive for people that have Saturn in Aries, whether it's your first Saturn return or your second Saturn return or your third Saturn return. You have one basically every 30 years. It's big. It's like a big, big point of entrance for you. It's also big for people that have Saturn in Cancer or Capricorn or Libra, because it means that Saturn will be making a square or an opposition to your Saturn. So basically every 7 years, we have a Saturn transit. Saturn's transiting itself in a hard aspect. So in a very activating or important kind of aspect. And I was scrolling on my TikToks as I do. So I came across this creator, Melanie Sanders, who has the We Don't Care Club. And it's a club for people who are in perimenopause or menopause, but it just struck me as something very Saturnian. So basically, in your late 40s to early 50s, you have what we call a Saturn third quarter square, meaning it's 7 years from your second Saturn return. And it's like when the moon is half full going back to new. It is a point of like a crisis of action where you have to be like, I don't want that anymore. Basically, it's I don't care about that anymore. Like Saturn is very much about societal like restrictions and traditions and the ways we do things, the ways we don't do things. It's about rules. Like it loves rules. But I was just thinking how like at the Saturn third quarter square, when you're in your late 40s to early 50s, you really stop caring. And for some of us, that means it connects with menopause or perimenopause. And I just think that there's this like really interesting connection between that time of life and this transit. And then Eliza, you brought up another really important transit that happens at the very end of your 40s.
Yeah, that's the Chiron return. So just like we have a Saturn return, every planet in our chart returns to itself at one point. And when you're about 49, 50, so late 40s, early 50s, Chiron returns to its natal position. Chiron, as you know, as you may not know, Chiron is the so-called wounded healer. So it is the planet that's associated with the centaur in Greek storytelling. And this is a healer, a teacher, a mentor. But this can be a time of profound reckoning with old hurts, with old pains, with old wounds, and also just trying to heal them ultimately.
Yes. I'm going through mine so I can say yes. And I'm about to go into my Saturn third quarter square. And what I can say is that you get to this point in your late 40s where you're like, I'm too old to let this part of my past dictate my present.
Right.
And yet it's still so fucking painful when I have to go in and do the work. Like, I don't think the work gets less significant or I don't think that touching down into those wounds that Chiron helps us to touch down into becomes less painful. I think we just are able to hold them with a greater awareness. And so it's less overwhelming, or you can put it into context in a different way because you've hopefully built out your life in some way that becomes a greater context for you to see like, okay, well, that's what happened back then. But when it comes up, I'm now able to more let it kind of wash through me instead of like consume me. So that's very different. But when it comes up, the crystallized moment of suffering, of your own human suffering and your own human experience that's particular to you, it just is what it is. But I'm less enthralled or captivated by it, or again, taken under by it. But it still is the thing. And that's what I find, I think, wild at this age. And I do think that so to everybody, all my Gen X crew, all of us that are like at the end of our 40s, beginning our 50s, this moment of like acute knowing that I don't want to do everything. I don't care. I actually don't care about all that stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of just starts to drop off. Like a lot of the things I cared about even 2 years ago, I really, honestly don't care about anymore.
What don't you care about anymore?
There's a lot of things that are worldly that I used to be very captivated by, that I used to want to strive towards.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something. What I care about now is feeling good in my body. I'm just like, what can I do to feel good energetically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically? But really, it gets very heightened when your hormones start to change and your body starts to change. It's like it's just like, I got to go back to basics. Like,
yeah,
I need to feel good every day.
Yeah.
And if that thing is going to make me not feel good, I actually don't care about it anymore. Like before I'd be like, oh, but I can figure it out, or I can make it work and I can fit it in. And now I'm like, no, I'm good. I do feel more sated, which is nice. Like I feel fuller in my own life. So I'd feel like I have to reach externally less. And that is I think, thesis of the I Don't Care Club.
I want to be
I love
honorary
it. I can't
member.
wait.
You want to what? An honorary
Be
member?
an honorary member.
Oh, you're a member. Because what is what are the other Saturn transits in your 30s? Like there's the Saturn return at like 27 to 30. But then by the time we get to 36,
and you were in our first square. Or
Yeah,
that's
I did
ending.
that. I did the first square.
Mine is ending now. I mean, it's over. But
I think that one's nice. But you do, there's something about that first square that I feel like so like for people
mid
now,
to late
what
30s.
sign would that be with? Yeah, mid to late 30s. What's this? You would have had Saturn in Libra?
No, Saturn in Libra is having its Saturn opposition, which is the next thing that you experience, which is
and Capricorn.
Yeah, Saturn and Capricorn, folks. Oh my God, the Saturn and Capricorns are already going into their first quarter square. Wow, that's amazing. I think it's a really exciting time. Like your first quarter square happens around the age of 36. Correct me if I'm wrong. Around then.
Yes.
And it lasts for a couple of years. So it gets you to your like later 30s. I think it's a very exciting time because it's opposite from what I'm saying. It's like, okay, I'm building towards this thing, but I have to refine it. Like if I want to get to this ultimate kind of like peak presentation moment where I'm going to bring something out into the world, which is your Saturn opposition, which happens in your early 40s, then I've got to choose. I've got to start to choose. I've got to start to really double down and believe in myself and say like, okay, if I do want to do this, and now I'm in my mid to late 30s, so I do know that time goes by very fast. I was just in my Saturn return, and all of a sudden I'm here. Like 40 is so much closer than I thought. That I've really got to choose, make a choice, do the thing, say yes, say no, and double down on believing in myself. That's how I felt in my first Saturn square.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how you guys feel.
Yeah, on a good day. I think I'll fit it in. I'll work it out. I'm
Yeah,
still doing
you got
that.
too much fire, Eliza. You both do. You're still cheery. You'll get more curmudgeon-y around your Saturn opposition. Okay, so people with Saturn in Aries, people with Saturn in Cancer, people with Saturn in Libra, and people with Saturn in Capricorn. This is a big couple of years for you. We have Saturn going into Aries on May 24th. It'll be there till September 1st. And so this is our introduction into Saturn and Aries. Obviously, anybody with major Aries placements is also going to really feel this. And because we're bridging these, Saturn moving into Aries, Neptune's already just moved into Aries, huge, major, game-changing astrology. Jupiter is then going to move into Cancer on June 9th. And that means that this is also a massive moment for people with major Cancer placements and major Aries placements. It's like a cleanup and a optimization. There's like Jupiter and Cancer is going to bring through a lot of gifts and a lot of blessings. And because Jupiter and Cancer are going to be in this square and they're going to square each other like right away, there's like, okay, here's all the opportunity. What are you going to do with it? Like, how are you going to bring this into reality? Or this is the expansion and this is the reality. This is the contraction. But I think we can get a lot done in that kind of energized state.
Yeah, I think Jupiter will help. I mean, we have Jupiter there for a year to make our lives easier, to make the Saturn and Aries easier. So we just need to know that this coming year, to be honest, it's like the best of Saturn and Aries. Because at least it has Jupiter like.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
But yes, but
okay.
Jupiter and Leo will be trining at least Aries. I don't know. I take that.
I hear you.
I liken it to when Saturn was in Aquarius and Jupiter was with it in Aquarius. It made it so much easier for that segment for those of us who have fixed signs angular.
Right.
And so this is doing something kind of similar, even though they're not in the same sign, because they're at least hitting them.
This is how I'm thinking of it. I said this in readings recently. I was like, okay, we're in the part of the movie where the main character looks like they're up against a rock and a hard place. Like we got Saturn and Neptune and Aries. That is tough astrology. That is a little bit of danger zone astrology. And then at the last minute, they remember the secret thing that their teacher put in their pocket and they're like, aha, I've got the thing. Yes. And they're able to like make it out just like not unscathed, but they're still able to like do something. I feel like Jupiter in Cancer is going to give us that little bit of thing that we need, that magic, that optimism, that like, okay, maybe something in the courts is going to get better. Maybe something in terms of education is going to get better. Like maybe all the Jupiter things that have struggled so hard over the past year and especially lately are going to get better. And they're going to give us the boost that we need and also bring the nourishment needed in a way.
Well, the last time we had Jupiter in Cancer, it was big for laws being passed that were in support of queer folks. So, for example,
thanks, Eliza.
So that I feel like
we could use some of that.
We could definitely use some of that.
Or for like people with uteruses and reproductive rights, even though they're trying to make us all have babies. That's like a weird like manifestation of Jupiter in Cancer. If there's like this fertility wars kind of thing.
So when we were talking about the last time that Neptune was in Aries, it was like civil war and but also the Red Cross and also but also like the KKK. It's a weird. And I was just thinking about when Saturn joins Neptune. What is my prediction about this? I mean, there's a lot to say. Like if you look at it from a positive perspective, it's kind of like the stuff that needs to like kind of melt down and erode. Like it's not a great situation for Saturn. It feels like that can kind of like any kind of structures or shit that doesn't make sense or law, like it's kind of like gonna kind of melt. I don't know. I feel like something gets put into a microwave as far as Saturn, which might be like a nice opportunity. But I feel like it's just going to be really, I don't think we'll be able to rely on traditional structures that worked for our parents, our grandparents, our the people who came before us. I feel like all this is kind of getting torn into a blender, and we might have to look to, like, also there might be reckoning with past things, like even when you were talking about like reparations earlier, or just like what's owed to people, what's owed to women, like let us rule, thank you very much, like that could be one way that these kind of systems melt down.
Or what gets brought about from the ashes, as you were saying, burn it all down. So then
burn it all down, and then because I just think that, well, when you were talking about the Jupiter part, I like Jupiter squaring Saturn and being able to, I just felt like everything you're saying is just like grace, like Jupiter's a planet that's going to give grace. It's like, you're human, here you go. And Saturn is like, what have you done? Right. So I think like finding the areas where there is grace is
I hope so. I hope that Jupiter in Cancer helps us to fortify our humanity. I think that could be like the best of that square. Like we're spurred into action, right? Like it's if everything was going well and we didn't have to worry about democracy or like the environment, then we would just be lazy and like reap the rewards of it. But that's not the situation that we're in, and it's not the astrology. And so it's like we have to do something with this gift, or the gift comes at a time where we're like, oh my God, thank you, I needed this thing.
I saw the best TikTok that somebody shared yesterday, and it was about like all those things in 2020 that you wanted. Guess what? They're here 5 years later, all at once at the same time. Like, and somebody's like, and the universe is like, you ready? And the person's like, no, I'm not ready. And the universe is like, but I'm giving to you all at the same time. And it felt like that kind
Jupiter
of
opposition?
I feel like Jupiter, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in 2020, and now us being in the square moment, I was like, oh, this is kind of like what people are feeling a little bit. Like, just they've been squaring each other and they'll move to different signs, but that kind of ripening of what you planted in 2020 at the Great Conjunction, I just feel like there could be like, if you made a wish, Jupiter, be ready for it.
When Jupiter was also in a bad sign. So Jupiter was in a bad sign this past year. And the last time Jupiter was in a quote unquote bad sign was 2020. So all of that. So the travel and all the stuff that happened. It's like there is a similarity between Jupiter and Capricorn 2020 and Jupiter and Gemini 2024 to 2025. And then Jupiter moving into Cancer is, for all intents and purposes, kind of it's the opposite of 2020 for the Jupiter part of it. Jupiter was in Capricorn then, it'll be in Cancer now. So let's hope. I'm down. Usually we do an Ask Me Anything, but I kind of folded our Ask Me Anything into the Saturn segment. So our question this week was about, what if you have Saturn in Capricorn? What does Saturn in Aries mean? And it means that you're in this first quarter square. If you are in your like 36th, 37th kind of year, maybe even 35, depends on like what degree your Saturn is, go look in the Chani app and look to see if you have Saturn in Capricorn. And know that this is the point at which everything you started in your Saturn return, you got to now activate. Like you got to make it real. No one's going to make it real for you. You planted these seeds at your Saturn return. You made the changes. You moved countries. You changed jobs. You and now you get to see that the proof is in the pudding. Like what was made out of that. If you're dissatisfied with the things you started when you were 30, and you're like, I am due for a change. Yes. Great. That's what a agitating Saturn square Saturn is about. If you're happy with how things are going, great. Also, that's totally, could be the case. And you'll want to like up level or upgrade or do something that's going to like get you to the next kind of level. Cause Saturn is like, wants to help us work hard at the things that are going to be important and satisfying to us long term.
And if you have Saturn in Sagittarius, that's finished now. That's
almost, but it'll come back from September.
It'll come back. Yeah.
September to February of 2026. You'll have your last. Do you have your Saturn in Sagittarius, Eliza?
Maybe. Yeah. Yes, I do.
I was also going to say if you have youngins in your life who are like age
God.
7.
Oh my God, yes.
And a
Thea.
14-year-old like I do.
Oh my
and who
God.
have dignified Saturns and are entering Saturn. You can kind of watch like what are they maturing? Like what are they working with? Like it's just like, yeah. It's
okay, well,
kind
what
of a
are their
massive
Saturns?
shift.
Their Saturns are in Libra and Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. If you have a 7-year-old, a 14-year-old, and you can pull their
Yeah.
chart up on the Chani app if you have a subscription. You don't even have to have a subscription to the app, but you can pull their chart up. Just go and edit your birth info and see what your kids' Saturn placements are.
Yeah.
What do we do with a 7-year-old and a 14-year-old, Thea?
Listen, I don't know. They're growing up so
we'll
fast.
come back to you in a couple of years and you can tell us what it was like to go through their Saturn square and 14. But it is really, really interesting to know that at those ages, 7 is the first hard Saturn aspect we go through. And 14 is the second one. And they're both about psychologically, they're about separating from the parents and growing up and finding your own sense of self in the world.
Yeah.
And being responsible for things. And
so I cry a lot.
oh,
like, they're so grown.
No. That's what I have to look forward to. All right, y'all. By the time we come back, Saturn will have moved into Aries and Jupiter will have moved into Cancer. And we will be so happy and we will come back with only good news. I promise. All right. Thanks for joining. Thanks, y'all.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.